And this is Adam Eliel Berkowitz from Breaking Israel News. Recently, an issue came up that I wanted an explanation, and I happen to know an expert. So I thought I'd have a nice little chat with my friend Shelley Neese, and we'll make sense of this. The issue that came up had to do with the Church of the Nativity in Bethlehem. And Bethlehem, of course, is one of the holiest, if not the holiest city for Christians. Church of the Nativity, I believe, is thought to be the birthplace of Jesus. And the situation in Bethlehem is not pro-Christian. It's actually becoming more and more difficult for Christians. And the Palestinian Authority has recently made moves to take over the courtyard in front of the Church of the Nativity. And this comes just before Christmas. And there are also claims that they're turning Christmas into a Palestinian secular holiday. So, which it's a big form of income, source of income, Christmas in Bethlehem. So they don't want to get rid of it entirely, but at the same time, they're Muslims, and Muslims is replacement theology on steroids. So first of all, I'd like my friend Shelley to introduce herself. Go for it, Shelley, and then I'll add a few points about how I know you.
Sure. Okay, so Eliyahu and I are good friends. I'm Shelley Neese. I work for Jerusalem Connection, a Christian Zionist organization in DC, and I'm the author of a book called The Copper Scroll Project. And Eliyahu and I see a lot of things the same, but back in the day, important
just
to this.
In case anyone was wondering, this is the book. I keep it on my desk. It is an amazing read. I don't know anyone who's taken more than 3 days to read it. Because it's just that riveting. Okay, you were saying, yes, the author
of for the product placement, Yeah, no, so actually the Church of the Nativity, I mean, when you reached out to me and wanted to talk about this, and you didn't even know kind of this part of my story, but I lived in Israel from 2000 to 2003, going to school there. And at the time, I was just a young student that the Intifada had literally and figuratively blown up in front of our faces. We had just arrived, and all of a sudden people are putting on suicide vests and getting on our bus lines to school. And so far I had been spending the first year there of just studying Jewish Islamic relations, the history of Israel, the history of Judaism, just trying to wrap my head around what was going on. I mean, I didn't even know who Hamas was before I had landed in Tel Aviv. And so suddenly I had all of this to learn and to understand. And so I had kind of gotten up to speed and was starting to understand at least the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. And now suddenly I'm living in Beersheba, Israel, and I'm watching the Church of the Nativity, surrounded by the IDF, overtaken by Islamic terrorists. And this is my place. This is the longest running site of worship for Christians in our history, and now that's what's at stake. So
for people who are not familiar with it, the Palestinian, I would call them terrorists, actually went into the Church of Nativity and took it over. And they in theory, I don't know, would you say they took them hostage, the friars and the monks?
Well, so there's two different versions of the story, and I mean, this is a classic sort of hostage-taking situation, but so what happened, it was planned, it was intended. Like a lot of things in the Intifada that want to look spontaneous, the taking over the Church of the Nativity was planned. During that time, Israel had gone into Bethlehem before. There was a lot of high-value terrorists in that area, and they knew that there was a 2-year food supply inside the church. They knew that there were wells, so if the water supply was cut off, that they would be okay. They knew there was a garden. I mean, they knew that there was plenty of room on the floors and in the monks' quarters to be able to sleep. So it was not spontaneous. It was intended. There was a little bit of a botch up in the IDF operation in terms of that it took them, the Jerusalem Brigade, 30 more minutes to land than had been anticipated. And so there were a lot of civilians and a Palestinian policeman that didn't necessarily have blood on their hands that ended up inside the Church of the Nativity with the terrorists. But at least 50 of the 200 that were inside the church were high value marked terrorists that Israel had come for. And that's why Israel wasn't leaving once they were inside the church. Had it just been Palestinian policemen and civilians and maybe a couple of like iffy terrorists, maybe they wouldn't have chose to do it this way. But these were who they came for, and they weren't gonna leave.
Who were the monks inside? What were they? Were they Greek Orthodox? Were they?
So it's triple layered. You know, every church in Israel, the most important, the Church of the Holy Sepulchre and the Church of the Nativity, they all have different denominational ownership, which for evangelicals in America, this doesn't make a ton of sense.
Right.
But if you're Orthodox or Catholic, it does. And so they all have a claim and a piece to those holy churches. Now, the Church of the Holy Sepulchre has a lot more. It's divided out a lot more among different Orthodox denominations and Roman Catholics. But the Church of the Nativity is actually only three. It's the Armenian Orthodox, the Franciscans, and they represent the Roman Catholics in this situation, and the Greek Orthodox. So it's a little less complicated, actually, than the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. The Church of the Nativity just has those three primary ones. They don't necessarily get along with each other.
The thing I don't understand is, did the monks open up the doors and say, you know, we're having a party, we've been waiting for you? Because it was just,
no.
There's a side to say it was a hostage.
Yeah, they were definitely taken by surprise. There is, in general, a rule that churches, as long as you lay down your arms, they said that they would have taken Israelis or Palestinians and giving them refuge, because that's a general position of churches in holy places, that this is a site that you can take refuge no matter where you stand on the issue. So they adamantly claimed, and when I say they, I mean all three, the Franciscans, the Greek Orthodox, and the Armenians, said that they had not been taken hostage, that they were voluntarily staying. Several of them did contact the IDF on their cell phones and administered their own release. So they didn't all voluntarily stay. The IDF was able to escort and protect some of them out, especially older clergy or people with health issues. There was a clergy that had epilepsy. And so there were some that were escorted out pretty early on and some that were escorted out later. But for the most part, they shuttered themselves off in their monastic quarters and stayed away from the terrorist groups inside. I think actually probably in this particular scenario, who was taken hostage officially were the Palestinian civilians that were teenagers and a few others who ended up in the church, who literally, I think, just got caught in the crossfire. And they were threatened. They were the ones sitting in the church and were told by the terrorists, you can leave, you can walk out of here. They didn't want to look like they had taken hostages. They wanted to look like they were taking refuge. But if you leave, you will be called an Israeli collaborator once you get out of here. And they knew what that meant. I think they were in the trickiest position.
The reason why I wanted to go over this a little more in depth is because it's a backdrop for the current situation. Right now, there's been a lot of tension between the Greek Orthodox Church and Israel. Also in the backdrop is just Bethlehem in general. The Christian population in 1948, the city was 85% Christian and 13% Muslim. Right now, what we're looking at is 16% Christian and the rest Muslim. And of course, there are no Jews at all in Bethlehem. We're actually not even allowed to go in unless the northern end is the tomb of Rachel, and that was actually used to be this little tiny building, stone building, but someone donated a lot of money and actually turned it into a real army base that there can be a war going on around you and you'll be totally safe with Mother Rachel. And I've written a few stories on it. I don't think Christians in America or even Jews in America understand the oldest Christians in the world. The Arab Christians claim to be the oldest Christians in the world. At the same time, they more closely identify with the Palestinians.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason I've been told, and there's a lot of effort being put into mainstreaming them and bringing them into Israeli culture and Israeli society, and they're really caught between a rock and a hard place, very similar to the situation you described, where you have Palestinians, you have Arabs, they generally, they speak Arabic, they live with the Palestinians, and even if they live with Israelis, they can be friendly to us, but as soon as they drive through a Palestinian neighborhood, they're fair game, they're in trouble. So for their own preservation, they will identify and adhere to the Palestinians.
Mm-hmm.
That's the side of the of the Arab Christians. The Greek Orthodox Church, though, has I'm going to try to restrain myself at this point from giving the motives, but there's a lot of conflict between the government of Israel and the Greek Orthodox Church, which has a lot of real estate. And there was a whole big dispute within the Greek Orthodox Church where they sold land from inside Jerusalem to Israelis, to Jews, and that got them on the bad side of the Palestinian Authority. The Palestinian Authority actually has a law that if an Arab sells land to a Jew, it's capital punishment. They will catch them and kill them. So they're not happy that the Greek Orthodox Church sells land. There was a whole big problem. The patriarch who sold the land was deposed because of the whole thing. So it's a crazy situation. I'm trying to keep it really simple, and I think you can, which is impossible. Also, first I want to throw it on the table so everyone realizes that there's a huge bowl of tangled spaghetti that people might not be aware of, and I'm hoping you can make a little bit more sense of it. So
no, it's true. When we say Christian, I mean, that's not, it's a blanket label with a lot of tension inside it. Yeah, no, for sure. It's so complicated. And I would actually say that the Greek Orthodox, I mean, as much as there's tension between the Greek Orthodox Church and Israel, right now, they're the ones that are sounding the alarm bell on the situation in Bethlehem and what's going on with the Palestinian Authority. It's the Greek Orthodox who are saying that the Palestinian Authority, it's actually the Roman Catholics, the Franciscans, that are being bit more in alliance with the Palestinian Authority and Fatah right now on this particular situation in Bethlehem, because it's the Orthodox that are saying Manger Square has been taken over and nationalized, and it's no longer a friendly place for our Christmas celebrations. This is something that the Palestinian Authority is trying to make, and instead of a explicitly Christian celebration, that this is a national Palestinian celebration. And that's not okay for the Orthodox, even if they've traditionally gotten along better with the Palestinians that they're living with. That's not, that crossed a line. Also, building a giant mosque across from Manger Square. I went to Bethlehem with my family this summer to show them the Church of the Nativity. And I give a very unorthodox tour of the Church of the Nativity, mostly covering the siege, and where the snipers were placed and what happened when. But the thing is,
none of the little baby Jesus and the manger stuff from you. None of that.
We do that too. But I feel like my specialty is something else. But the thing is that we took a cab. See, any Christian pilgrim knows this. So once you cross the border over into Bethlehem, and it's pretty easy right now. It wasn't easy back in 2000, but it's easy now. So you cross over, you go to Bethlehem, you get a cab, and immediately you realize I'm not in Israel anymore. Like, even just the way that the cab drivers are really aggressive and bargaining, and even just a bottle of water isn't an absolute price, it's a negotiated price. So you really feel like you're somewhere else, even though you're just on the other side of the border. And so our cab driver drives us there, and immediately they want to sell you the whole package deal, not just take you to the Church of the Nativity like we wanted, but they want to take you to 2 other holy sites, and they're really insistent upon it. Our cab driver stopped on a hill. I mean, it felt like we were more in Alexandria, Egypt in terms of experiences we've had traveling. so he stops on a hill and he repositions and gives us the plan again of, I'll give you this price if I bring you to all three of these places. But we stayed insistent. We just wanted to see the Church of Nativity. And so once we get to the Church of Nativity, he whips out his rug from the passenger side and he runs to Manger Square to go pray while we are visiting inside the Church of Nativity, and then he's going to bring us back. And we look out, and in Manger Square, which is normally where all of the sacred holidays and these things are celebrated so that they have enough room for the Christian pilgrims, Manger Square was taken over. There were hundreds of Muslim Palestinians praying.
I've heard that many times. I also want to point out,
confusing.
Israel prides itself on freedom of religion for everyone. As a state, we've always seen ourselves as the caretakers of holy sites for all religions. I've seen Muslims praying at the Western Wall. It's only when the sites come under the Palestinian Authority that it's difficult, and there's no freedom of prayer, and that's a concern we have. And to be really honest, it is not at all comfortable for a lot of Jews. Israel actually gives out Christmas trees for free. So, did you know that? It's amazing. I was in Haifa last year, just before Christmas, and I mean, Haifa's beautiful. You have real coexistence in all of its beauty. It's a beautiful, very aesthetic city. I mean, the Baha'i are definitely a part of that. But to see all of the religions come together. Interestingly enough, when I was covering this story, the whole situation is actually, whenever we talk about the status quo on the Temple Mount, people have to understand status quo is not the meaning of the word. The word status quo means the situation as it is right now. Status quo was a set of laws set up by the Ottoman Empire 250 years ago, governing the holy sites in Israel. And of course, they were slanted towards the Muslims. It was the Ottoman Empire, but the same laws that rule over what will happen on the Temple Mount, that are so problematic for the Jews, are the same laws that cover the Church of the Nativity in Bethlehem. The only thing is that Israel, for the most part, follows those laws, even when it's very, very difficult. And they are changing, but for example, when Israel went up to the Temple Mount, there was one mosque up there, that was the Silver Dome, and currently there are 5 mosques up there, 5 designated Muslim prayer places, and no prayer places for anyone else other than Muslims. And if this Muslim monopoly, this monolithic Muslim dominance goes over into Bethlehem, there will not be a Christmas tree in Bethlehem next year.
Well, it feels like they're purposefully encroaching. So it's one thing to put a mosque opposite the Church of the Nativity and opposite Manger Square, because the demographics have changed. No fault to the Christians living there, but the demographics have changed, that now instead of, like you said, being 85% Christian, it's now 85% Muslim and 15% Christian. So not surprisingly, there's a mosque there, but encroaching on Manger Square for all of the public prayer.
What does that mean for you?
It just means, like, how much closer will they get? I mean, how much do they get to the door of humility before I enter into the church? Like, where is the boundary? And Muslim prayer it's not quiet, it's very abrasive. And I don't mean to sound like an Islamophobe when I say that, but I just mean they also need to consider just how encroaching that can be upon Christian worship. And so if they can't even hit the pause button for Christmas celebrations, I don't know what that'll look like. And Christians I feel really sympathetic to Palestinian Christians. And I do believe Palestinian Christians, that Christian Arabs have been part of the landscape in Israel since the Byzantine period. and the denominations have morphed into different things, but they've always been there, and they have a complex identity ever since the Islamic conquest. I'm sure it was real comfortable for them during the time of the Byzantines or during the brief period of Crusades, but right now it's not comfortable. It's the worst it's ever been. Juggling a Palestinian Christian Arab identity has been difficult. It has to be almost unmanageable right now. So I don't know what it means. You can't nationalize Manger Square is the main moral of that message. And I don't know who takes up that fight, but the Greek Orthodox might be finding themselves on the same side of the position of Israel for once on this, because they are protesting what they see as an infringement on their territory. And let me tell you, in terms of the Christian on Christian of all of these rules for the status quo as it applies from the Ottomans to the Christians are very nitty gritty. For the Temple Mount or for the Western Wall, it's big. It was big public spaces. What the Ottomans did for the Christians was, this is the square footage that the Armenians get to watch. This is the square footage that the Coptics get to watch. These are whose windows. This is the ledge that belongs to this group, and they are adamant in protecting
I wonder
their rights and privileges, because
I wonder because a couple weeks ago, the Vatican gave a relic, a piece of wood from the manger, to the Palestinian Authority to bring it to Bethlehem. And I wonder, it seems like a beautiful gesture of friendship, but I wonder if that wasn't part of the power play. Maybe that's a little bit too insidious, but the Vatican has very strongly allied with the Palestinian Authority. And it might be that Bethlehem will be, you'll have the Catholic presence, but if you're not Catholic and you're not in with the Palestinian Authority, you might not be there. And especially, I'll tell you, the Greek Orthodox Church, a week ago or 2 weeks ago, there was some kind of ecumenical meeting or a meeting in Turkey, and the Greek Orthodox Church sided very strongly against Israel. And I was thinking to myself, they're siding. I understand that they've had these issues over Jerusalem real estate, but now when they're on the verge of being booted out of Bethlehem, you would think. And then that's why I thought of the hostage crisis. I'm like, you would think that if Palestinians are in there with guns pointed at you, you'd think you'd side with the Israelis, but that's not so true.
But that's why the siege was so interesting, because it showed the layer cake. It showed how you can literally see them being taken advantage of, their holy place just being a tool in the belt of terrorists. And their response was definitely against the Israelis. I mean, when you go back and look at
totally crazy.
They would interview these Franciscan monks, and they would repeat over and over that this is a shame and a disgrace that the IDF has surrounded this place. They would never direct their language at the terrorists that had overtaken the church. They would, even though eyewitness accounts from what happened on the inside said that the Franciscans or Greek Orthodox didn't want anything to do with the Palestinians inside. They were pretty much secluding themselves off in their own quarters. It's not as if that they were all getting along and everything was cherry and roses, but their public front of what they were saying was that this is a place that we have given this place of refuge and that the Israelis need to back away, that this is a disgrace. And they really put a lot of up in arms about that the IDF had damaged the church and that there was millions of dollars worth of damage to the church. The truth is that the exterior of the church was fine. I mean, there was a little bit of sniper back and forth, and so a little bit of gunfire that damaged the facade a little bit, which historically has had other damage from other periods of warfare. But for the most part, it was the inside of the church. It was a fire that got caught where they were trying to cook inside. It was all just like the trash and debris that a bunch of people living inside the church for 39 days, what that caused. So it actually wasn't what the IDF had done. But it's just, I mean, it's Stockholm syndrome. It's just the psyche of who are your friends, who are your allies, and who are your enemies. And I'm going to insist on that narrative, even if it's in my face. And there were lots of different groups in there. It's not even as if all the Palestinian groups and terrorists were allied. There was Fatah, Hamas, Palestinian Islamic Jihad. There was a little piece of everyone in there, and they were making sure to keep themselves separated from each other. So they were acting as if there was a unified front message, when in truth, it was total chaos inside and divisiveness. Anyways, you know.
So this is the thing. I think if there's going to be any one sentence takeaway from this whole thing, it's that, you know, you would think that throughout this is not going to be one sentence, of course. You would think that because of history, you have the Crusades, you know, the Christians against Catholics against the Muslims. Here in the Holy Land, you would think that that's what it boils down to: black, white, this of us against them. And it's really not that simple now that we actually have a state of Israel. Now, even when the Church of Nativity is at stake and is in serious danger of becoming a Palestinian site, I mean, please keep in mind that according to Islam, Jesus is a very major Muslim figure. In Medina, there's a grave next to Muhammad ready for Jesus, and he plays a major role in their eschatology. So
Mary too, actually. Mary has her own.
Oh yeah. Well, actually, there was a pre-Christmas speech a couple weeks ago in an Arab village I wrote about, and the Palestinian, I think he was the prime minister, a Palestinian prime minister. He was going on about, oh my gosh, he even said Jesus was a Palestinian terrorist. He was, and Mary is the only woman who's mentioned by name in the Quran. So, yeah, I know.
That's called Palestinian replacement theology.
That's just it, okay? So you would think that given all this, not only is it not black and white, Christian against Muslim, but even when the Israel it should be in the best interest of the Christians and the churches to side with Israel, even in the most extreme case of a hostage situation, they will still not be pro-Israel. Do you have any idea why?
No,
I have a nasty little suspicion in the back of my head that I hope is wrong. Okay.
Wait. What do you think?
Is it anti-Semitism? Is it just?
Okay, that's what I thought you were going to say.
Is it that they dislike Jews so much that even when a gun is pointed at their head, they will choose to side with the Muslims?
I mean, it certainly can't be that that's who they think is the most powerful in this situation, or it could be their biggest benefiters. I don't know. I mean, sometimes just whatever community you're embedded with, you also just get, I mean, I hope it's not just anti-Semitism. I would certainly make that charge for the ones that are using the Christians. I do feel like the Christians are getting played, and I don't know if it's completely their fault, or it's just victimhood and being a minority living in the place that they are with the long history. So I still feel like it's a wrong that can be righted. And maybe that's just me being too optimistic, but is it just that one more push like this? Is it just, you know, whether or not the Palestinian Authority takes over Christmas, or whether or not the Palestinian Authority takes the keys to the Church of Nativity? Like, what will it take?
Also, the keys to the Church of the Sepulchre are actually with the Muslim.
In Muslim hands. That goes back to the Ottomans. And honestly, that's probably been a good thing in terms of priests in the Church of the Holy Sepulchre have had fist fights for other reasons. So maybe
I have a word of hope for you. I have a word of hope for you. I remember when I was living in Gush Etzion, right after Oslo, they built tunnel roads so that the Jews wouldn't have to travel through Bethlehem. Before that, we had to actually drive through Bethlehem, through the narrow streets, and it was not very pleasant. I have a few friends who were born right in front of the burial place of Rachel, because you get caught in traffic on your way to the hospital giving birth. Boom. So they were named Benjamin. A couple of them, I know a couple guys named Benjamin who were born right in front. And then they built the tunnel roads, which it was really amazing. It's a fast road that instead of taking 45 minutes to get into Jerusalem, you're in Jerusalem in 20 minutes. But they also put down a checkpoint. Now, the thing about the checkpoints is they built this checkpoint that actually, it looks like the border crossing between America and Canada. It actually looks like the border crossing between America and Mexico. It's serious security. And in the back of all the settlers, the Jews who lived there, were kind of scared, because we realized they're going to set up a border. We're going to be living under the Palestinian Authority if we want to stay in our houses. And we're going to have to go through a border crossing. On one side of the thing is going to be IDF with guns, and on the other side of the toll booth is going to be Palestinians with guns. And it was a very scary thing. But like, I believe it was, who was it, Golda Meir who said this? I forget which leader said this, that the Arabs never miss an opportunity to miss an opportunity.
I think that was Avi Yvonne, but yeah.
Okay. And the thing is, we were all set, the government was all set to just shovel it all over to them and give them Gush Etzion. And Netanyahu, to his credit, has been playing a waiting game, and he's playing it really well. And as a result, the Gush Etzion never ended up in Palestinian hands, and the Palestinians could have been, if they had just played the game a little bit, they would be sitting pretty, their own government, their own land. And I can see the same thing happening in Bethlehem, where they rule in Bethlehem. The IDF does not go anywhere near there. If they really played their games a little bit, just played it a little bit smarter, there would be zero Christians in Bethlehem. And Christians would only be allowed in December to drop their cash and to leave. But because the Palestinians have not played it quite that smart, I think that's the reason why to this day there is Christmas and Christians in Bethlehem. But to be really honest, I looked at this recent thing. I wonder what's going to be next year. Is there going to be Christmas in Bethlehem? I'm very serious about it. I think
there was a point during the siege that they found an apartment near Manger Square, near Bethlehem. I mean, near the Church of the Nativity, that was filled with explosives. And so, had the siege not gone well, had something happened, I suppose, I mean, based off the fact that this apartment had been recently stocked with explosives, that the plan was to blow the whole thing up. So
it's not unheard of in Islam to do that.
No. So I do think that there's tripwires out there. And so if the Palestinians do, there's deal breakers. And so your allies are your allies in the Middle East is a long history of varying allegiances. And so it feels like this one has been around a while, that the Greek Orthodox and the Franciscans have tended towards siding with the Palestinian Authority. But in the grand scheme of things, it's not that long. This alliance is not bulletproof. Right. And should they do something like roll up the Church of the Nativity, I guarantee the connection is severed. So
I really, that sounds crazy. And some people might think that you're, speaking in hyperbole, and there's no way. I mean, how could anyone ever imagine blowing up the Church of the Nativity? I mean, I just go to Turkey, visit Hagia Sophia. It was once the largest building in the world. It was a church, and then it spent a couple hundred years being a mosque. Look at. I remember the videos of them blowing up. It was in Afghanistan. The Buddhas, thousands of years old, these huge statues, blowing them up. And I'm not Buddhist, and what everyone said, it broke my heart. It's like, this is their religion. There should be respect there. There should be respect.
Right.
They blew up
Antiquity and so there's, and the Church of the Nativity is as far back as Christianity goes. And so I think a lot of evangelical Christians, we don't usually worship in those kind of settings. We're not Catholic or Orthodox in terms of how we imagine worship spaces to be or need it to be that spot. I think evangelical Christians like to go into the shepherd's field, and they identify with the land a little bit more than these spots. But I actually adore this church. I find this church very close to my heart. This is, in terms of Christian history, as far back as 30 years after, Christ's death and resurrection. Like, this was the spot identified by Christians as the place of his birth. So this is a sacred spot to me. I might be evangelical, but this is a spot that I will lay down for and that I want to protect. And so I don't think that it's helpful either for evangelical Christians to think, well, that's a different kind of Christianity. It's more complex. There's more infighting. No, this is important to us all, and it's been protected for a very long time. Even going back to Hadrian. Hadrian put a Roman pagan. I mean, talk about the same exact thing he did on the Temple Mount. He also did it there in terms of like, I want to de-Christianize this place. And so he put pagan statues on top of it and a pagan place of worship. So this has been something that Christians have been fighting against for a very long time in defense of this very small, humble cave that is connected with our Savior in this time of year. And so, I mean, not to get like hyper Christian on you, but I think this is an important place for us all, and it's worth protecting and not just disassociating from because it seems like the other. It seems like a Palestinian problem or an inter-Orthodox Catholic problem. I think it's all of our problem.
I think, as a Jew, of course, I don't keep Christmas.
Sure.
But I love watching Christians do Christmas. They get so nice, and you can see that's like the family, the holiday. It's. I remember talking to some people I worked with, and we were like, there's some Christians who don't keep Christmas, and we were like, why? It's the most beautiful time of the. It's the most beautiful thing about Christianity. We wish we could do it. So
I remember in Jerusalem when I was living in Israel, there was a high school in Jerusalem that for their last dance, and they picked different themes, like kind of prom themes.
Mm-hmm. Oops.
They picked Christmas as the theme. Our neighbors, when we lived in Israel, used to come in December to see our tree and our stockings. Like,
I mean, that's really,
it's a
that's really, I mean, that's
beautiful, nice thing. And I mean, it's not so.
Oh no.
Oh shoot.
Yeah, we're losing the connection. To be really honest, Shelley,
it broke up for a second there.
I think we've given everyone an awful lot to think about. This has been, I mean, this is a huge issue that I don't think people are aware of. And I'm not speaking in hyperbole when I say next year there may not be Christmas in Bethlehem. And if that's important to you as a Christian, this is something you should look into. I think we'll end it there. I want to say that there's a reason why the Copper Scroll Project is on my desk. I'm hoping to arrange a three-way conversation with Shelley and Jim Barfield, who's in charge of the Copper Scroll Project. If you don't know what it is, it will absolutely blow your mind. You will not believe just the simple story of what it is. Basically, the temple is a few feet underground waiting for us to move a couple shovelfuls of dirt, and then we'll have all the gold, silver, and implements from the temple in our hands, ready to start. It's hard to believe, but that's about as simply as you can put it. Hopefully, we'll have another.
That's an appropriate plug for Hanukkah.
True, absolutely true. Yes. It's right there waiting for us.
Dedication.
Dedication of the temple.
Well, thanks, Eliyahu.
I did speak to one hidden mystic who said this Hanukkah is it. So we'll see. Anyway, so thank you so much.